I'm DJ.
And I'm Andrew.
Welcome to One Shot Tavern,
A TTRPG podcast where we seek out new ways to tell your stories through different systems and games. And today we are joined by the talented Bruce Cordell, established author and senior designer over at Monty Cook Games. Bruce has written well over 100 role-playing game products, including titles from 4 different editions of D&D, as well as one of the creative minds behind numerous setting books from Cypher over at Monty Cook Games. You are quite prolific in this space, and it is an honor to have you here with us, Bruce. I have personally been invested in products that you have been involved with pretty much my entire TTRPG career. It is a pleasure to have you here. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. So, Bruce, one of the points of One Shot Tavern is we started with Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 back in around 2010, 2009, 2010. And, kind of went from there over to Pathfinder, and then we jumped back over to 5th edition, where we stayed for quite a while until January of last year, where we hopped into Cypher system. And Andrew and I were actually talking just before the show about how funny it is that our personal TTRPG journey mirrors your career so well. So
my question with that is I think that what's really cool is you've been a part of what a lot of people's entry point to the hobby is, which is you are part of establishing multiple settings and books in the entirety of a lot of early D&D for people. And then you were a part of establishing this whole new thing that for us has been kind of our gateway drug into the greater space of TTRPGs. So I gotta know like what that is like, kind of pioneering a lot of the exodus for a lot of people. Not that people can't still enjoy D&D, but like the entirety of this space is huge, and you were a part of establishing a very amazing niche within that. So what was that journey like in terms of your career, jumping into not only D&D, but also stepping out of that bubble?
Oh, well, when you start off in a career like this, you don't really know what it's going to be like or how long you're even going to be part of it. Because I did some freelance in the early 90s for Iron Crown Enterprise. Based on that and based on doing a lot of work with computers and MUDs and mushes at the time, which are multi-user text-based games, Wizards of the Coast hired me in 1995 TSR hired me in 1995 to do a MUD, D&D-based MUD or mush. But then for whatever reason, they put me right in the core D&D team. And so I was writing 2nd edition D&D for about 5 years. And that turned out to be I was just doing the math because of another podcast I'm going to appear on, 18 different products. So I did a lot of stuff that actually is still part of the D&D world lore today, just by pure accident, I guess I would say. And then when 3rd edition came around, Wizards of the Coast bought us in 97, transferred a lot of us out here to the Seattle area. And we started working on 3rd edition. And I was lucky enough to be able to write the first adventure for 3rd edition, which was Sunless Citadel, which they brought over up to 5th edition, which was also very nice.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of running that one. Love that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, hold on. I'm probably going to get some noise in the background here. Maybe some dog barking, but maybe not. Maybe just a little growl. No, that's all good. So, then it turns out if your full-time job is writing game material, you're going to end up putting a lot of work into a lot of different products. And like you said, I've written hundreds of games and parts of game settings and game adventures. Been involved in, various rule iterations, 5th, 3rd edition, 3.5, 4th edition, 5th edition. And as you said, I left in 2013 to begin working on the Cypher system. Well, it wasn't the Cypher system quite yet, but what would become the Cypher system.
Right. Numenera, right?
Numenera, and then pretty much the strange. In
Yeah.
fact, the reason Monty asked me to come aboard is because I left Wizards to write a novel, a new sci-fi novel, and I was telling him about it, and he said, we could write a game based on that. That was the strange. Once we did the strange, which was a lot of genre hopping, essentially, you're going into alternate recursions of reality, based on fiction, seeded by fiction. Anyway, it was realized that, this basic rule system used by Numenera and then the Strange is kind of a very robust rule system that can be used for lots of different genres, and thus the Cypher system was born.
So before we started recording, you had mentioned that you've actually known Monty since junior high. What was your introduction to TTRPGs, and of course, the relationship with Monty?
Introduction to D&D at the time was first edition, and I was at a Boy Scout camp in the late 70s, and the older scouts were playing using something called Dungeon Geomorphs. Familiar with those from first edition? I don't know.
Hmm.
They were pre-rendered dungeons, very basic, in a kind of a bright blue color, and they were, you penciling over them and talking about it. And I was like, oh my God, my mind was blown watching these kids play. And I soon used my allowance to buy a box, the blue box. I can actually show you here. This is the actual blue box that I bought myself with my allowance.
That is amazing.
And then had the scouts of my age play through the stuff in here. This is like a basic set, right? It's not the full rules, but it was good enough for a few games, and did that for a while. And so that was my introduction to D&D, and I was playing D&D with the scouts in my scout group. And then in 8th or 9th grade, we had to take a shop class, which is you're doing, metalwork, leather work, that kind of stuff. And I was making a leather coaster, and I had a sword and an axe on it, right? And some kid came up behind me and said, "Do you play D&D?" Right? And that was Monty. And that's how I met him. And him and other friends that we made then just, became fast friends and played D&D through junior high, high school, and beyond.
Yeah. So fast forward through, all of the editions that you've worked on, 3.5, 4, and then D&D Next comes out, or code name D&D Next, right? What became 5th edition. You and Monty are working on the project. Monty leaves, and then you get the call from Monty, not terribly long afterward.
About a year.
Basically saying,
I stayed for another year to, well, I didn't know what Monty was going to do, but he left, and turns out he was writing Numenera.
Yeah. So what? I mean, obviously, it seems like that was a little bit of a no-brainer, right? For Monty calling and being like, "Hey, do you want to come do this with
he
me?"
had actually left Wizards once before after 3rd edition. I mean,
Mhm.
they actually asked him to come aboard specifically as a contractor to be the head of 5th edition, D&D Next. But he had left he had left Wizards at the end of 3rd edition before 3.5, and started his own company called Malhavoc Press. And I did a bit of freelance for him, even though I was still working full-time at Wizards. Wizards allowed that. And then at one point he asked me, "Do you want to just come and work for Malhavoc Press full-time?" I was like, I don't know. I like my salary at Wizards of the Coast.
Right.
I don't think that you can probably afford, what I would need to, maintain a lifestyle that I would like. And he's like, "You're probably right." So, and when this time around, things were different at Wizards. The environment was different in a lot of different ways. I won't go into, all that, but let's just say it was different. And I was like, "Please, God, get me out of here." And yes, they were able to offer me, a competitive salary. I'd calculated the basic amount I would need to make, and, they were able to meet that. Yep. So, and, plus some. And, in the years since then, things have gone well for MCG. So, back up
so
to
kind of on that financial note a little bit. I think that it's been really interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong here. I know at least The Strange was kickstarted, but how early on was that crowdfunding piece kind of married to the business model of MCG. Cause like that is, as far as I know, that's majority of the products that I've seen come out have all been Kickstarted.
It's there's like the Cypher system rulebook weirdly was not Kickstarted, but yeah,
Oh, really?
pretty much, almost, I would say 99% of everything else was, because yes, that is the business model. And it made it just, Numenera showed that, getting the money up front was really a great way to go when you're putting these things together rather than getting loans from a bank.
Yeah.
And the Strange, followed up. And by that point, they had hired Charles Ryan, Tammy Ryan they had aboard. So yeah, it was just a very small group of people with a lot, editors and stuff. Wearing a lot of hats, I would say. And, once we kickstarted The Strange, then, that unlocked money to, edit and do that book, but also, pay salaries, all the kind of things you need for a company. And just kind of kept going forward from that, because why, well,
If it ain't broke.
yes.
Right.
I mean, you always have to, kickstarting has changed over the years, so we always have to be, in fact, we don't even use Kickstarter anymore. We
I was
use
going to say, yeah,
BackerKit.
BackerKit, yeah.
And so we always have to be, every new crowdfunding campaign requires new thought and new thinking. Like, is this going, we can't just do the exact same thing over and over, right? Because that will get tired. So always trying and innovate in that space.
Yeah. So what, out of all the things that you've worked on, like over the years, like name some of your favorite things that you've worked on. Because like Die Vecna Die is still pretty prolific. I've played in a 3.5 version of Die Vecna Die. I've played in a 5th edition hack version of Die Vecna Die. And that was like 3 months ago.
Right. That's very cool. Yeah, that particular one was meant to be the end of 2nd edition, be like, here's how you end your 2nd edition campaign and move on to the 3rd edition where we want you to play. Yeah, in the 2nd edition realm, some of my favorites are Gates of Firestorm Peak, because that's the very first one. Return to the Tomb of Horrors, which is a box set. I put a lot of time and effort into that. A lot of those first ones, are hard to step away from. I could just run down the list of all. The Illithid.
Right.
A lot of really great, really fun stuff that I worked on in 2nd edition that people, like you say, still talk about. But lots of others, people have no idea. So yeah, 3rd edition, Sunless Citadel, Sonic's Handbook. Things start to run together at this point.
Because you've been doing this for a while and you've produced so many products, DJ and I, we have just started putting out, we just both did a zine back in February for Kickstarter Zine Quest, and we're just starting in the publishing space and shifting out of just like running D&D and running Cypher games and prepping and homebrewing stuff. We're actually trying the writing side. I have already found myself retreading old ground of stuff that I have already written in some way, shape, or form, whether it's something for a bestiary or it's a game mechanic for a different system that I've re-homebrew for, to fit something else. I gotta know what that's like on the scale of your career, like when it comes to things like reapproaching like Planescape and doing stuff for Planebreaker, or, like finding ways to make things distinct that may share some similarities. What's that journey been like when it comes to differentiating one thing from the next? And
it's definitely something that, as you've identified as a danger, because you only have so much, that you can put out before, you'll start to maybe hit new things. So there's various strategies. One is to be aware of it. 2 is to realize it's okay to some extent, because 3, as long as you iterate and always bring something new, like even if you're going, I created a weird, creature like this once before, but this one has this new thing, it's a new twist, right? And it's in a different context. That's okay, I think. Most people won't be like, well, it kind of has some similarity to Y, right? It's like, no, most people, if you're actually consciously, thinking about it and not just iterating. And another thing you have to do is constantly be taking in new media, constantly being reading books, watching shows, listening to podcasts on a variety of different topics, not just even in fantasy and sci-fi, but whatever, energy, tech, just how you have to be an omnivore. It also means that, every so often you have to slow down and allow your mental reservoirs of interesting new things coming to your mind to fill up again, so you're ready for the next
Right, like
project.
the comparison of creativity versus like working out, right? Like the more you flex your creativity, the more you're taking in, like the more you're stretching your mind, right?
On the genre side of things, you've also had insane experience with genre spanning. Okay, so I am really trying to sharpen my axe when it comes to getting more comfortable running horror or running more pulpy stuff, and like trying to get familiar and, like you said, like omnivorous when it comes to the media that I'm pulling in and trying to stay inspired by. What's like your, like, I don't know if you have like a whole method for it, but like when you're saying like, okay, I'm gonna sink in and I'm doing yet another post-apocalyptic thing, and this post-apocalyptic thing is distinct, and I want to make sure I'm pulling in things that help it be like distinct. What are you doing to kind of focus yourself on a new project, that you're really wanting to be distinct from other things?
Well, I guess I wouldn't do another post-apocalyptic book. I don't think I've specifically worked on a okay, yes, you're right, I have.
Trust and Redemption.
I've done Gamma World. I worked on Gamma World, but that was slightly a different genre. It had a different twist on things. And so when I worked on this most recent post-apocalyptic book, I took a much broader survey of all the things that say post-apocalypse, and it's been 10 years. So there's new properties and stuff and new ideas that are floating around out there to create up a new post-apocalyptic. And the post-apocalyptic book I'm talking about is Rust and Redemption. And it's a world-building book in the genre of post-apocalyptics. And it also has, I worked on it with Dominique Dickey, and they wrote the setting for that. And I pretty much did all the other, all the pieces, parts, here's something you could think about. Here's something you could think about, right? That just, all the tables and all that, most of the adventures. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you're going to retread the same ground, you have to try and, one, give it a new twist, maybe even try and expand it or focus it right on a specific setting that's new and different, like the setting, like in that book. I only had a little bit to do with that, but to the extent I had something to do with it, I was like, we should do this and this and this, which is new, right? And has nothing like it appeared in any of the Gamma World stuff that I'd seen. So yeah, you gotta make some changes.
Right. Absolutely. I would say that's actually one of my favorite parts about Monty Cook Games, was diving in and then being like, oh, because with other systems, you have to rely on the unofficial hacks of the system to kind of like fit your genre in. But Monty Cook Games has a genre book for almost everything at this point, in order to give game masters the tools that are baked in, right? And players too, right? So some of the types and descriptors and stuff in, not the types, but some of the descriptors and focuses of Rust and Redemption were really well. Oh, you got yours too. All right.
Had it open in front of me, actually.
Andrew's is PDF, but
yeah, sorry.
It's, as a game master, who I am a game master for hire, so I do this professionally. So I'm running games constantly
all week.
Wow.
All week, having those tools given to me, and especially like given to me, right? Because you guys put them in the open license that you use for Cypher system, which I find to be kind of incredible.
Solid good guy
especially after especially after last year's OGL fiasco, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I just gotta say, like, just because I want to give my personal review and how much Cypher does mean to me. Like, I think that when I approached being a dungeon master for like, a decade, it was a very specific way, right? It was the ways that I had seen it done in front of me using a singular type of system. And I remember I was like a Geek and Sundry stream, I think, that they ran Numenera
Mhm.
long time ago. And I remember watching him being like, this setting is so weird and I love it. I don't know what's going on, but I need this. And I bought the starter box then, and I held on to it for years. And I read through everything and I'm like, who am I going to convince to play this? How do I explain this? This is so cool and so weird. And all my friends just want to play this very specific experience. And when I finally just kind of forced some of my friends to play a Cypher game, it was incredible. I remember I ran the starter box for probably 4 or 5 friends a couple of years back. And it was a blast. I'm like, that was
Mhm.
so easy to run. And I had so much more fun. And I didn't feel like I had to read things front to back to back to front, 3 times before I could run it. And it fundamentally like rewired my brain when it came to
Yeah.
storytelling and in kind of ease of use for the game design side of things. Go ahead if you have anything on
Well, I
that.
was just going to say, yeah, that's when I came over to Cypher and realized the GM doesn't roll the dice,
Hmm.
players roll all the dice, and I can screw with the players and give them a reward for doing so rather than just screwing with them and being like,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm a and give you XP, right? It's just like those two tools by themselves are like gold, right? For
Yeah.
Mhm.
for the system. Also, it's a very simple system, obviously. To
Yeah.
once you start playing it, you're like, oh, it's a very thick rule book, but that's just because it's
Right.
all the fun little exceptional options for the
Right.
various powers and abilities that players can have,
Yeah.
and so on. But the basic system,
Yeah.
choose a difficulty from 1 to 10, and the difficulty of your D20 is based on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
even like last session that I ran on Tuesday, actually, we're at the end, by the way. We're tier 6. We are
Yeah.
like full
Wow.
on faction influencer level people in,
Yeah.
in my own homebrew world. And we got to the point where we're like I've written a couple supplements that I haven't released or anything just to like run some like faction level stuff. Um and we're kind of like, oh, did we just run that whole session without rolling a single die? Because like we just had we
Yeah.
kind of capped out on like how much we could pull off. And we're just like, all right, we're not, but it was basically the we're basically gods kind of moment. In the campaign, we're like, okay, how did we want to end this campaign narratively? But it was because the system got out of the way for
Yeah.
the story and the narrative and the interplay between the people. And so it changes so much of how I approached running a game, it wasn't adversarial dungeon mastering, but it was like you're saying, like I'm rolling, I'm trying to beat this, I'm trying to do that. And instead I'm just hosting something for my friends. And it's been one of the most freeing things for me as a
Awesome.
storyteller and getting to play with my friends. So thank you for the small part you've played in that. Very large part you've played in that.
Massive part. Yeah. Um,
A small to medium part, I guess.
There you go.
so I often teach people to play Cypher System. I see the intimidation that everyone always has, and it's kind of the same intimidation that like I have when looking at other systems. Uh, but they get over it so quickly once they start to like realize that, oh, every role kind of goes the same way. Every role has this similar formula, and it's like all of a sudden I'm seeing these players go, oh, I have the power to influence whether or not I am going to succeed on this, right? I am not powerless. If it is something that, could kill me or come close to killing me, I can still do it. I can spend that. And I think that has given a lot of the players that I have worked with this feeling of being in control of their own destiny as characters. Whereas in other games where you have a modifier, right? You roll the dice and then it's like, cool, okay, I got a 6 on the die and I add a +6. Oh, the DC was unfortunately, 15, right? And sometimes it feels bad. For example, the very first time that Andrew ever ran 3.5 for me, I got hit as a paladin, and I said,
Can
I
I
don't
roll to
get to do
defend?
anything in return. I don't get to roll to defend. And Cypher allows me that
Yeah.
after 14 years, 15 years of playing TTRPGs. I finally have the ability to be actively defending
defend
myself
myself.
as a player.
Right.
Well,
So
and
I
I
love
think
it.
That's
that
such a good point.
it handles a lot of like did you saying it handles a lot of the reflexes that people coming into the hobby kind of have, right? So that example of defending yourself, right? It rather than it being, well, I attacked you and I rolled higher, so you got hit. It's like, okay, cool. That doesn't feel good. It hands so much
Yeah.
of that over to the players, and that kind of design ethos in the game. It's not just in the defense role. It's all over the place in the intrusions, the way that we hand the narrative in those moments to like, hey, go ahead and break stuff for a second. Have fun with that. Maybe GM a little bit.
Right. I mean, just to go back to like you're defending yourself, but even on the GM side of that thing, it's so much easier when I'm GMing, say I were GMing that, that particular into play and be like, okay, Paladin, this third level demon's, attacking your Paladin. Roll, speed, a speed defense roll of, 9 or higher.
Mhm.
And you can, apply effort. You can apply an XP if you don't want to be hit or whatever, right? But even on my side, right, it's just like, so it's just that little click of easier knowledge to know. I already know what the DC is. I'm not rolling to see, right? I'm not spending extra time. And if I want to screw with you, yeah, then I can, like you just said, use a GM intrusion. Or maybe you were suggesting that a player could do a player intrusion, which is also
either way.
a fun
Also
thing.
amazing, yes.
Well, so I think that the player intrusion is the classic case of the player that's like, oh, I'd never be a GM, right? I'm like,
Right.
just wait till you start playing with intrusions because you're gonna like it. Like if you can just get the reins for a second, it's fun. Like have fun with it.
Yeah.
And I also think that, like to the point of like you're not rolling dice, you're not memorizing a bestiary, you're not like doing all this complex work as a GM as much. I think that it's such a good gateway for people to get into running games. And it's been a blast getting people into Cypher that either have a background in D&D or something else, or have never played anything before. And they're like, oh, this makes sense. It just clicks and I love it. So, now, and I have a question. So within the design space, you've been able to work on a myriad of stuff as we've already covered. Are there things that are still itching, for you? Like, I just want to do fill in the blank. Like, what are the things that feel like unresolved? And if these are products you can talk about, that's fine too.
Well, I guess the easiest example would be that I also have written novels. And in fact, like I said, I left Wizards to write another novel because they killed their book department. And I was like, okay, well, I guess that's the end of that. So
Which
now,
is crazy to me.
Well, I think they sort of have it back anyway. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it was crazy at the time though. That was, I had to walk away from a 3-book deal. I got one out, that particular, sorry, I keep sidestepping. So what I was going to say is, yes, sometimes I do want to work on something on my own, but I have the outlet of writing a novel on the side. I'm still doing that, right? I have a Patreon where I am basically having novels. So I was writing a superhero novel before we did a superhero thing. And actually, it was kind of weird because Monty said, hey, do you want to write a setting book specifically? I go, I kind of don't because I'm writing a novel and I don't want to port my setting into this because then it wouldn't be mine, it'd be MCG. So I was like, all right, well, I'll accept the challenge and come up with a different superhero setting, which became the Origin. And super happy with that. And, I would actually write a novel in this, but, I finished finished the novel for that, and now I'm writing another novel. What was that novel called? The Archy of Broken Dreams. ARK of Broken Dreams was the name of that superhero novel. And I'm writing a new novel called Dream Rider in the Nightland. And it kind of is this sci-fi interaction with the world, the land, Dreamlands. The Nightland is kind of the Dreamlands in this case. And the Dream Rider is, an important figure in that. And, right now there's no MCG product that is that, let's explore the Dreamlands, right? But, who knows, maybe someday there will be. And I'll be like, oh, okay, I don't want to do my novel because, I want to keep that. Bruce Cordell
Awesome.
only, not MCG.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But that's kind of the way I can, if I want to do something, I could do, or write a short story.
It's very similar to how I ended up doing. So Andrew and I both did Kickstarters for TTRPG stuff. I did a setting book that was more geared towards Cypher system. So last year, in January, I got fired from my job and was basically like, well, what do I do now? And so like I came up with like this character with my wife named Polly Pink, and Polly Pink lives in the apocalypse. But it's not the apocalypse, it's the post apocalypse. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I like finished the manuscript, got it all ready, and then I was like, how much does it cost to draw? Oh, that's really expensive
For a graphic
to
novel.
have a graphic novel created, right? And drawn and inked. And so I was like, okay, cool. I want to do that someday. But what can I do in the meantime? And so like I started to work on Polly Pink in the Apocalypse as a TTRPG setting, and it became Pink Security and More. And then perchance, Monty Cook Games goes, hey,
Rust
we're
and
releasing
Redemption.
Rust and Redemption. And I was like,
Perfect.
oh my God, that's amazing. I'm ordering that as soon as I can. Because I wanted this post-apocalyptic world where everybody kind of like starts to pick up the pieces of the world that we left behind, right? And so going from this like, oh, I wrote essentially a short novel. And now it's like, okay, cool. I have a campaign setting for it, and people liked it enough to give me like $3,500 for it,
Nice.
and to publish it. And it's funny because that is one of the reasons that this interview is happening right now, is because I reached out to I saw that there was a contact us button on Monty Cook's website, and one of the things was specifically podcasts. I was like, we just started a podcast. I should do that. And so I message and in it I happen to just include my link to the Kickstarter. And so like Kate replies and she goes, "What are you doing sending me a Kickstarter on a Friday just after I got paid?" And like first of all, absolutely felt honored. And then second of all, we started talking about like, hey, can we, interview someone, that is intimately familiar with the writing process at Monty Cook Games? And Kate was like, I can absolutely arrange something for that. And I was just like, this is the most amazing thing ever. I was on vacation at the time, like vacation halted in my mind to just that. Because I was just so excited to just be able to talk to you guys about this. Because as Andrew said, Cypher system really kind of changed a lot for me as far as how I run my games. As I said, I am a game master for hire. I run 5 paid games a week. I run an actual play that uses the Cypher system, actually uses the Stars Are Fire for that, because it's a great little supplement there. And I there was just this shift in my brain where I stopped saying no to my players because of it. Because in Cypher system, there really isn't much of a no. there is a, how would you like to try to do this?
Right.
Right. And
Tell me what you
what are
try.
you willing to do to accomplish it? And
How
who's
dumb
going to
do you
help
want to
you
be?
do it? Yes,
How
absolutely.
much of your actual physical, like, physiology
Yeah.
do you want to pour into getting this done? Do you want to die and pull it off?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just been a wild ride recently. So to circle back, the novel writing to
Yeah.
TTRPG pipeline seems to be really real, because I started a novel and then I went, this one would also be a really good TTRPG.
Yes,
Yep.
of course. Yeah.
When it comes to writing, I have a lot of stories, as we all do, that I've always so desperately wanted to port over and create more of a novelization of. And some of them are campaigns that run, like the campaign that I was just saying that we are, tier 6, we're capped out. We basically completed the campaign. I'm like, I've talked to a couple of the players and they're like, you should like write something like this. One, I've never done any novelization, but like when it comes to stories that you've told, had there been any novels that you've put out that were the direct result of like players or stories you told at the table? And, like what's that relationship been like for you as a improvisational storyteller and then somebody that has a specific story they want to tell in a novel?
I would say pretty much nothing that I've ever written in a novel is something that I took directly from like play. On the other hand, well, when I worked at Wizards of the Coast, especially, and I was writing Forgotten Realms product and writing, and then in my free time, my off time, I was writing Forgotten Realms novels. There was a lot of synchronicity between, like, if I created a new, culture of people that lived underground called the the Imaskar and the higher Maskar. And I was like, oh, I could create that as a character in the novel that I'm writing, right? So there was a lot of back and forth between the kind of setting stuff that I was writing in my day job and then the interactions and the kind of things that people would meet in the novel, the characters would meet in the novels.
Yeah.
And sometimes the characters in the novels then would become individuals that I would write about in the RPG book. But I was in a unique position at that point in my life to kind of put my hands down on both sides of the scale and create.
What's a
create
cross-pollination?
IP. And of course, that's all IP. That Wizards of the Coast owns, and I don't own. So I was kind of disinclined to put a lot of like my personal stuff from characters into those novels. They did a couple times. Like there was a character named Japheth in the Plague of Spells, City of Darkness, whatever, Key of Stars trilogy. That was one of my favorite characters that I had in high school that I just loved the concept of so much. I was like, screw it. I'm going to make this guy a character. Even the name is going to go into the novel because, whatever. I still have the character in my heart and whatever. It doesn't really matter. So these days, well, still the same thing. I don't know. When you're writing a novel and the interactions with your characters, they just go in a direction you need them to go for the plot of the novel. And that may or may not have anything to do with anything that's happened at a game table. Probably, usually not in my circumstances. That doesn't mean, you can't be inspired. A lot of people certainly do.
I think that when it comes to having such a legacy with these games and, like developing all these different worlds and genres, I think that the thing that I keep coming back to is I find with what I've done in my tables and what I'm curious for you is what is it that within these stories that you keep coming back to? What are the big themes that you find yourself incorporating into your stories and into your novels and into the games that you develop and run? Like for me, when it comes to like if I'm running a cyberpunk game or if I'm running, a high fantasy thing, there are things with like how I handle humanity and the idea of being a human or not, like that I tend to put into those over and over again. I was just curious if there's some threads that you find yourself weaving through those different stories.
It used to be story threads that I would actually connect various things just very, with characters, that were part, you would be mentioned in and it'd be like story threads like that, characters or events that would run through all my books. That if you really knew all my stuff, you would find they called the Cordello verse, but it was very subtle, right? These days, yeah, thematically, I find myself kind of coming back to the theme of trying to things are broken and we should fix them. Like what was it? Gods of the Fall, I guess, started kind of that trend. It's a high fantasy setting that I wrote, where characters, the heaven of this fantasy world just smashed onto the world itself, and burned. And it's 40 years later, and characters are like, PCs can start kind of getting slips of divine energy and become new gods and fix this broken world. But I kind of like, that sort of like, things are terrible. How can we fix the world? How can we fix everything, right? And, I guess that's kind of, and in the real world, I'm like,
Yeah,
the world is getting close to, there's a climate situation happening that we need to fix. Sooner than we realized, unfortunately. So that's a theme that I find I subconsciously sometimes, but sometimes consciously, like the Rust and Redemption book that just came out. There's obviously themes of like rebuilding and and what can we do now, and not everything is grimdark in those rules modules, right?
Right.
There's like what can we bring back, and what can we salvage, and what can we not do the next time that will cause these problems again. But
that's like the main theme to go back to like Pink Security is like I said, it's the post apocalypse. They're picking up the pieces. And so like for me, I'm also very conscious of literally everything going on around me at all times in the world. Probably too much so.
he's
And
my news
just
source for a lot of stuff. Like,
but like,
it'll
did you know this
break and then
happened?
he'll hit me up.
social media, if we got to get rid of it.
I know. But I was just looking at the world and like, climate change and all of those things and pollution and all of that. And I was just like, what happens after? Because there's a good chance that like we don't actually like disappear, even if like a lot of us do, right? And
There's a
so
good
there's
chance that we
that.
won't actually disappear. You're right.
Yeah. And
There's so
so
many of us in so many different biomes at this point.
exactly. And so like those people who are left, like the people who were able to make it through, like what are they going to do? Are they going to stay in their little hovels and like their tiny little, communities? Or are they going to eventually branch out and are they going to explore the world that was destroyed, right? And all of these skeletons left of the cities and everything around, going out and forming a new society and going, wow, look at all of this useful junk that is literally buried in a landfill. What were they thinking? I can use this. Let's take it apart, put it back together. And so like it's a junk punk setting. Which actually brings me to, because like that actually kind of informs me a little bit on some of like Monty Cook's like social awareness, right? Is like that's something that draws me to the company a lot, especially with other companies kind of failing a lot on the socially aware spectrum. That like Monty Cook Games, MCG, and like everybody that I've talked to from MCG seems to actually care
When
about the
it
people they
shows
work with in the world.
there's follow through, not just words,
Yeah,
and I've appreciated that a lot. And I think that when it comes to storytelling and this like deeply, it's like the deeply human piece of this is like we're telling stories to be with people, to interact with people, and in terms of between us emailing with Pete, in terms of like even talking to people at Gen Con, at the Monty Cook Games booth, talking to you, it has been very refreshing to feel like we have some genuinely human people on the other side that care and that are here for the same reasons as us. And to that, it has been such a pleasure talking to you.
yeah.
I really appreciate having you on, and um, You truly are a legend in the space, and so this is an honor, and
Thanks.
it's been a pleasure talking.
Yeah. Is there anything you would like to like specifically plug? I know that Monty Cook Games just finished up Knights of Dust and Neon, which got a big backing out of me. Actually, it's the most I've
Ha.
ever spent
Oh,
on a
well, thank you.
crowdfund in my life.
I'm halfway through High Noon at Midnight right now.
I'm
Halfway
so
through writing it.
excited about that.
Yeah,
It's
it's
funny
fun.
because like Neon Rain, I was like, oh, a cyberpunk thing, and I was like, crap, I'm finishing my cyberpunk campaign that I just like homebrewed all of
Yeah,
these
you keep doing that
cybernet. I keep doing that cybernetic
You're
enhancements. What I need to do is I need to get an idea, and I need to sit and wait for about 6 months
because then Monty Cook Games will
because
make a book.
we'll be supporting the idea. So, is there anything you want to talk about with that backer kit?
I mean, if anyone hears this book, this interview, and thinks the sound of Neon Rain or High Noon at Midnight, a Weird West book, Cyberpunk, Neon Rain, or another completely brand new setting called
Gunslinger Knights.
Gunslinger Knights, Knights, which is a weird blend. Sounds good, go over to Back a Kid or just, search up Knights of Dust of Neon and you'll get taken. I think there's probably late pledges still being allowed, I would imagine. As far as I'm concerned, want MCG, Monty Cook Games, go to if you like anything, there, they have a store. If you go to my website, brucecordell.com, you'll see a design credits link in the tab. You'll see like everything I've ever written because I kind of curate that, and you can see it's quite a bit, including also a link to my Patreon there. So brucecordell.com is a good place to go to learn more about me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bruce. This has been a pleasure.
Absolutely has.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to talk to you both and meet you and hang out.